that little bobble in the live stream. So we're going to pick things back up. It is 11:30 p.m. Eastern time here in Orlando, 10:30 Central time in Louisiana. So we apologize. The software that we had just decided to have a major hiccup there and decided not to work. So we have started the stream again. I'm not going to start from the top because we showed you a couple of things. I showed you some video. But what we were trying to show you when the stream died was a live picture out of Corpus Christi, Texas. So our partners at Surfline have cameras all across the world, and in particular, we're looking at Corpus Christi, which again is not expected to get a direct impact from Delta, but there's definitely going to be some wind there, and you'll likely see that pick up as we head into tomorrow. So there's the live camera. You can see the white caps, and that's not unusual on just any normal night, right, along the Gulf of Mexico, but probably a little rougher than normal for sure. Just remember that several hundred miles to the to the east, I have to get my bearings, of course, is Delta, which is going to get very, very close to Texas coast before it turns north. It's actually already started to turn north. But it is forecast to take that more pronounced turn towards the north here shortly. Okay, so thanks. We've got some folks that are joining us back from the stream. It's so hard when we're trying to do these and the equipment doesn't follow suit because it makes it very difficult when you're trying to do this stuff seamlessly. So I apologize here. Let me just make sure that I've got everything on my end set up, and then we will jump right into this real quick. And we always tell you guys, if you've got a question for us, if you got a city, I'll try to do my best to answer your specific location as best as as easily as I can. Sometimes it's really hard to pinpoint a forecast if you're asking about a city or a state that's not near the coast. That's a 5-day, that's 4 or 5 days away. But I'll do my best. So certainly ask away, and we'll see what we can get going on here. So what I do want to do is actually I'm going to go back and bear with me 1 second. I'm going to go back and show the eye on the loop here, because if you were with the stream, this is really, really good stuff. And if you didn't catch the first stream before it died, this is also really good stuff. So I want to show this again. So you can see the eye very clearly here on the ground-based radar. And Matt, if you don't have that full, go ahead and take it full if you don't mind. The eye right there. And we talked about this yesterday, how the eye is growing in size. So it's now about 30 miles across. And remember at one point, and again, this is just kind of rudimentary here, so this is a ballpark there, but it's roughly about 30 miles across. It's technically 28, I believe. So at one point, the eye itself was only about 5 miles across. So it's gotten 6 times larger than it was just a couple of days ago, and we knew that was going to happen. That doesn't mean it's 6 times more powerful. It just means that the storm has expanded, just like when you blow a balloon, sort of. It starts off very small, and then it gets larger and larger the more hot air you put into it. So it's kind of the same theory, sort of. Basically the basic physics around that are kind of the same premise, but it's just another factor that we've got to weigh into the impacts, because again, as I started to tell you earlier, hurricane force winds extend out about 40 miles from the center, so generally in the northeastern quadrant right here, and then all the way over to the about 160 miles, and my pointer is falling short there, but we're already getting tropical storm force strength winds very, very close to Louisiana's coastline, and that's going to really ramp up as we head through tonight. And then tomorrow morning, I still think it's going to be a decent day. I still think you're going to have some time to do some last minute preps, because here's a look at the 5 live radars that I've got up, and you can see that embedded in some of these squalls are some heavy, heavy rains. So let me put some rain rates on these, and this one that's just north and west of New Orleans putting down 2 inches, over 2 inches, 2.25 almost an hour. And then we've got some north of that. That particular one has got about just about 1/4 of an inch of rain an hour, and then one here that's still offshore, the same thing. But of course, these will only exponentially go up. Let me pull this up a little higher. Let's take a look at some of that rain up there in Jackson, in southern Mississippi and northern Louisiana there. So some of those rain rates, especially in those reds and those oranges, 1.66 there, and then this one that we've got is over Mississippi, just under an inch. So, an inch an hour isn't terrible, but when you're talking about a cell that has the potential to sit there for a couple of hours, that can do some significant flooding. And there's already flash flood watches ongoing in this area of the country and only expected to get worse as we head into tomorrow, of course, when Delta gets closer. So here's what I did that was new from yesterday. So what you see, all those numbers in the Gulf are buoys, and they all have sensors on them. So these are current wind speeds, and you can see that some of those, and I'm going to actually scrub this because the Hurricane Center said there was a wind around 63 miles an hour sustained with some of these buoys. I don't know if I have the exact one that they're talking about, but you can see that when I scrub it to the end, some of those buoys have sustained winds around 53 miles an hour in Alaminos Canyon, and then there's about a 47 mile per hour wind in Garden Banks buoy. So again, these buoys offshore, but they're the closest sensor, if you will, to the hurricane. So it already indicates that we're seeing winds in this neighborhood, and you can usually tack on about a 10% uptick in the gust. So a 53 mile per hour sustained wind would have a gust in the neighborhood of 60, 62 miles, give or take. And of course, as we head into tomorrow, I expect these numbers to exponentially increase, of course, with those 120 miles an hour winds possible. We do think it's going to weaken a little bit, but not by much. So as you take a look at the coast here, we'll just take a quick gander and see who's got what. So 16 mile per hour winds in Corpus Christi over in Texas, Port Lavaca about 10, up in Galveston area about 15, Lake Charles 15, and much of the area here across Louisiana and Texas in the 15 mile per hour range. A couple of areas there outliers, some of those buoys just offshore about 25 or so. But of course, through the overnight and tomorrow, that's going to change pretty significantly as we head through the next 24 hours or so. All right, so here's the wind radii product. So this is not a model. This is real data that's extrapolated from the Hurricane Center forecast. So basically what they do is they tell us how many, we talked about this, that the hurricane force winds extend out about 40 miles from the center, and tropical storm force winds extend out about 160 miles per hour from the center. So 160 miles, not per hour, 160 miles from the center. So what they do is when they're plotting the 5 days, they still do it the old school way. They plot it out on a chart, and they do the coordinates, the lats and lons, the latitude and longitudes, and they plot those 5 days out, and that's how they come up with this particular wind radii product. So here we're looking at tonight at 11:30 p.m., but watch as I scrub this forward, and you'll see the yellows are those winds that are up to tropical storm strength. So they're around 39 miles an hour to 57, and that's going to be primarily in gusts. And then in the orange, we've got those winds just below the threshold of a hurricane, right? 57 to 73, and then 74 and up is going to be those winds around 74 to about 110 is the possibility as we see landfall. So here's I scrub this particular product right over Cameron, Louisiana, moving over Lake Charles on the outer peripheral there of New Iberia, Port Arthur as well, and I'm just going to scrub it really slow so you guys can see, and still keeping it on hurricane fourth strength as we head through the overnight tomorrow, and even into Saturday we start to see that wind field shrink, of course, because it's going to get weaker when it's away from the Gulf of Mexico, but still sustaining anywhere from 39 to 57 as we headed into Saturday. So we're still going to be talking about these winds in that neighborhood of 50 miles an hour, which is plenty of wind to take down power lines, create some power outages. You have to remember this infrastructure in Louisiana has already been very compromised from Laura and Beta and other tropical cyclones that we got this season. Sally, of course, across the Gulf Coast as well. So I don't think it's going to take a lot of wind to really make some of these areas highly susceptible to more power outages and problems as we head through this weekend. So a look at the infrared. We've seen the eye clearly early. We saw it clearer earlier today on the infrared. It's looking a little obscured, but you can still see it there. You can pick out that pinhole very easily, and you can already see the outflow from the hurricane that continues to spill over Louisiana's coast and southern Mississippi and southern Alabama and even over into Texas. So it's still got that opportunity and that window to do some strengthening tonight. Not likely to rapidly intensify. I've seen that on Twitter all night tonight. People saying, oh, it's rapidly intensifying. It's rapidly intensifying. It's definitely gotten stronger. I do think the window is there for it to get a little bit more stronger, but it's very, very close to that sweet spot, if you will, of where those sea surface temperatures are going to not be quite as warm as they are right now within a few hours, and it's already getting southwest wind shear. So we already have seen that on the visible. It's hard to pick it up here on the infrared, but we saw the southwest shear that was coming out of the southwest and kind of just disrupting a little bit of the central core there. So I don't think there's a big opportunity for this to rapidly intensify. We'll see how that plays out, but I just don't see the ingredients coming together at this moment, but I do think there is a window for this to get stronger in these next 4 to 6 hours. Hopefully not much stronger than it is now, you guys, but there's still several more hours for it to do some more before we should start to see it level off, and then we should see some minor weakening before it makes landfall. So winds again at 120 miles an hour, pressure 955, and the movement north-northwest. That's the other big thing that happened at 11 o'clock today, so 11 o'clock tonight. So we've seen it moving towards the northwest for most of the day today, but now that secondary component towards the north-northwest is the indication that in the atmosphere, Delta is interacting with that trough that I've been talking about, that area of low pressure over Texas, and it's starting to turn more towards the north-northwest. And we should see that trend through the overnight tonight, and then even more towards a turn of the north. So remember, if you watched yesterday, I said, if you lived in Texas, you're gonna be like, oh my God, this thing is coming straight for me, because that's what it looks like. But we're already seeing the turn. Remember, you got to keep up with the direction of this hurricane, which is north-northwest, and it should continue to turn towards the north as we head into early tomorrow. So here's the official path, and you can see the official weakening that the Hurricane Center brings it to a Category 2, a powerful Category 2 with winds at 100 miles an hour, and then going to 50 miles an hour on Saturday, and then 30 after that. Of course, it would not be much longer until it would lose all of its tropical characteristics, but still strong enough and powerful enough that it's going to create a lot of rain, a lot of flash flooding conditions. Tornadoes are going to be a threat tomorrow and probably even into Saturday. And then we're going to see it move into the southern Tennessee and southern Mississippi and Ohio river valleys, where they too are going to get some leftovers of this hurricane, and hopefully not a whole lot. But I do think the risk for the flooding and the rain is going to be fairly significant as we head through the weekend. All right, no changes to the warnings. You can see them there. The area shaded in red is the hurricane warning. The areas in pink is the tropical storm warnings, and those extend out over to south of Galveston, and then on the right side rather, over through Louisiana, the entire state of Louisiana under some type of warning, and then it stops just shy as you get into the state of Mississippi. The storm surge warning was issued yesterday, and as you look at this, you can see a huge chunk of real estate that's under this storm surge warning. There's a storm surge watch underneath that, but we think the potential for that 7 to 11 foot surge is where there's going to be the greatest concern over by Vermilion Bay. So I've got a graphic I'll show you on that in just a second. But here's another vantage point with the reds. That's where the surge anywhere from 9 to 11 feet. New Iberia, Lake Arthur, and then we're looking at the oranges is about 6 to 7 feet, give or take, and then 3 to 6 in the yellow and 1 to 3 in the blue, which by the way extends all the way over to Mobile Bay. So I don't think necessarily Mobile's going to get a 3-foot surge, but I think 1 to 2 is definitely doable and very realistic. That's certainly not life-threatening, but it is dangerous. We've talked about that. It only takes about 18 inches of water for cars to get lofted and moved with the current of a storm surge, and bodies, human people, can actually get knocked over with much less. So it's really dangerous stuff, the storm surge. It is the number one hazard in a landfalling hurricane, and then that hazard switch is over to freshwater flooding, which kills more people than anybody, because people that live inland don't think that they're necessarily at risk, but they are, because these are huge rainmakers. So there's a look at the storm surge, the peak storm surge potential. And I'll just start over from the left, over in Texas, and we'll kind of go through that. 1 to 3 feet by Port Lavaca, up into Galveston, 2 to 4 feet. But I think what Galveston's going to get is the exact same they got with Laura. So remember, because of where Laura is going to come in, the winds will be coming in from the north and pushing water out of Galveston Bay back into the Gulf. So we could see, again, a big chunk of the beach show up that isn't normally there, because the water's going to be being pushed out of the bay and back into the Gulf. So particularly in Galveston Bay, I think that'll be an issue. And then as we head over to Louisiana, Cameron, it's going to start to increase to 4 to 7 feet. The reason why of New Iberia and Vermilion Bay has the highest, because that's that northeastern side, the side that we talk about that has the biggest threat for the severe, the worst that Delta will have in terms of the surge will be in that northeastern quadrant. So 7 to 11 foot surge there. And then even over to Grand Isle, we're talking about another 4 to 6 feet storm surge. New Orleans in the neighborhood of 1 to 2, maybe 3. And the same thing for Biloxi back over to the state line of the extreme western edges of the Florida Panhandle, 1 to 2, maybe up to 4 feet. But I think 1 to 2 is probably more realistic for that area on the current path, because I think most of that's going to be isolated to that area that's right over New Iberia and Homa, over to Grand Isle, and then we'll start to see the surge decrease. But remember, the surge is going to start, and the water has already started to rise, but you're really going to notice it tomorrow, because remember, the surge comes ahead of the landfalling hurricane. So when we take a look at this high resolution radar, model future forecast, this is the HRR, and this starts at 11:30 this evening, and I'll move it forward in time, and you can see that the blue there is the path from the National Hurricane Center, and you can see right around 5-6 o'clock. Let me back that up a bit. You can see around 5 o'clock, very close to what should be landfall, and then probably in that window 5, 7, 8, 9. It's hard to really tell pinpoint the exact timing, but even as we pull this out further out in time here, you can see that there's still going to be a fair amount of weather left over. Even as we head into Saturday morning, I do expect some of those more intense feeder bands to be interacting with parts of Alabama and Mississippi, and maybe even into Florida. So there's going to be a large chunk of real estate that will have pieces of Delta. Of course, our biggest concern is where the center comes in, but I do think there is still going to be opportunity for multiple tornadoes, or at least the possibility is there. I'm not going to say that there's going to be a tornado outbreak by any stretch, but you don't typically get those with landfalling hurricanes, thankfully. But I do think we're going to definitely have the possibility of some short-lived tornadoes. We see that every time we have a landfalling hurricane, and almost without exception, that happens. So anticipate that tomorrow to be under a tornado watch tomorrow, and that will last probably most of the day and into the night as Delta moves towards the north. So as we take a look at that storm risk, here it is from the Storm Prediction Center: about 3 million people at the slight risk in that area shaded in yellow, and about 1 million people at the marginal risk, which is the area shaded in that brighter green that you see there. So that's where the biggest threat will be for those short-lived tornadoes, because remember, the hurricane itself is rotating. It's a massive engine that rotates, and it's rotating thunderstorms. So anytime you've got a rotating thunderstorm already in the ocean, or in this case in the Gulf of Mexico, and it rotates on shore, there is, where it interacts with land, and it starts to get friction because the land isn't rotating, obviously. So it kind of halts its structure, and that creates lift and vertical wind shear. And oftentimes we can get short spin-ups of short spin-ups of tornadoes. So I definitely think that's going to be a possibility as we head through tomorrow and maybe even into Saturday. Okay, sea surface temperatures. So we've been talking an awful lot about this. So let's click on some of the numbers. 84 degrees Fahrenheit is some of the numbers here. And then as I click around, Delta 85, but this is incredibly warm water. Just prime number one fuel source for these heat engines is this warm, buoyant, salty ocean or sea surface. So, but as we get a little closer towards Louisiana, notice you'll see a little bit of a drop in the numbers, and they go just ever so slightly down. But that is enough, you guys, that we could see some, and look at that, even some of the continental shelf here, it gets in the 70s. So that's why the Hurricane Center has Delta kind of leveling off tomorrow, because it's very close to those cooler waters. And even though it's only 3 or 4 degrees, that's enough when you take the slightly cooler sea surface temperatures and you add in that wind shear, that southwest wind that's disrupting our cylinder. Remember, think of a paper towel holder, the cardboard, those cylinders. Think of that, if you will, as the center of a hurricane. And so when you get something that comes in from the south of the side, let's say that you were going to stick a pencil inside of that paper towel cylinder, that disrupts the core, right? It disrupts that perfect cylinder. So that's what happens when you get winds that come in from another direction and block that perfect vortex from continuing to stay vertically stacked, as we call it. So there is the southwest wind shear. There's also the fact that it's moving into slightly cooler waters, and it's going to be interacting with land. It already has, and all of those factors come together to kind of disrupt the structure of the hurricane. But I wanted to show you this Hurricane Hunter plane. This was from around 9 p.m. tonight, so just almost 3 hours ago. And these were 2 passes with the NOAA and with the Air Force airplane. There's two different missions here. But take a look at this information. So this is data that was coming in real time, and actually this is the latest, it's 10:33. So this is the actual latest mission. So that during this flight pass, they had a wind at 128 miles an hour with the pressure at 948, and they have to extrapolate that when they're at the flight level versus what they think is going on at the surface. And then at 10:33, they had a minimum pressure of 958, a wind speed of 99. And I think that's the diameter of the eye there, 35. It's covered up. I apologize. That popped up since I looked at this. So it's always ingesting real-time data. So that came in before we started this live stream. So the eye itself is technically about 35 miles across now, not 30. And the wind speed at that time was about 100, and the pressure was 958. So we see a very close correlation to that 128 with the official winds at 120 miles an hour. Remember, they fly through all of these different quadrants of the hurricane, and then they come up with this extrapolated data that takes into account where they fly in at. They're not flying at the surface. They're usually 15,000 feet or above. Some as high. Sometimes the NOAA aircraft are as high as 50,000 feet up. Depends on the flight. So they take that into account and adjust the flight level winds, and that's how they come up with the sustained wind with a hurricane. So with the rain rates, here's what we expect between now and the next 3 days. So you can see the big swath, that big tongue, if you will, of the highest rain rates of 5 to 7 inches, smack dab right over New Orleans. Right over Louisiana, not right over New Orleans, right over Louisiana, and then up into Arkansas, and then a little bit of Mississippi as well, and even into Tennessee, 3 to 5 inches. And I've actually got a product here that's going to lay out that rain rate for you pretty nicely. I think this model does a nice job. So here's some of those totals. Couple of inches over in Galveston in Texas, but Lake Charles and Alexandria and even Monroe, Louisiana, up to 6 inches. So that verifies that product I just showed you, 5 to 7. We've got this model forecast that calls for up to 6 inches in Monroe. So doing a great job there, picking up on the potential of the rain rates. And then over in Mississippi and Alabama, 2.5 inches, give or take. Atlanta, you'll get that on the backside of the weekend, Sunday more like, 2.5 inches of rain. And then over into Charlotte, that's going to be late Sunday for you and into Monday as the leftovers of Delta moves off towards the east. Look at the water vapor. I've got that kind of zoomed in a little bit, and it shows the amount of moisture available in the atmosphere. Remember, the more moisture there is, the more energy there is, if you will, for the tropical cyclones. And you can see that we've got our big pink blob there, which is Delta, right smack dab in the center of your screen. And then we've got a ridge of high pressure, which is hard to tell, I know, but it's generally in this area. It's right over Florida and the eastern Gulf of Mexico. And then we have a trough. Let me draw that out here real quick. That's we've got one that's right about here. And that's the one that's going to help turn. Let me grab another color. That's going to help turn, and already is turning Delta in between these two channels of that ridge, that H to the right and the L to the left. Let me put my L on there too, just so we are all on the same page. And the low pressure center generally in that area. So in between those two channels is where we're going to see Delta turn more towards the north. We've started to see that today. I'm much have a much higher confidence now that the trajectory is towards the north-northwest. I suspect that we'll see more of a component towards the north tomorrow, and then a turn towards the right or towards the northeast as it tries to scoot away from that trough of low pressure and goes over the southeastern U.S. and eventually the mid-Atlantic as we head through the first part of next week. All right, Category 3, winds anywhere from 111 to 130. That's where we are right now. We think that the hurricane will get to go down just a bit to around 100, with a being a very strong Category 2, but I've got the 3 on here just so you know. So that could produce extensive damage, power outages that could last more than a week. I would say that's a conservative number. If this comes in right where Laura did, where they're still trying to repair there, of course, that is a multi-year restoration process, not multi-months when you have a major Category 4 hurricane that comes in. So I think if we see a very similar path, we're going to be talking about power outages out for a substantial amount of time, because there is going to be a lot of people that already probably just got power back not all that long ago, and now they're going to have to deal with power outages yet again. So there's our trough that I drew for you. You can see it over Texas and that old frontal boundary, that stalled front over the southeast. There's our ridge to the right, and again in between those two channels, if you will, those two pressure centers is where the channel will be for Delta to move. And there's another close-up vantage point. Lots of rain tomorrow night at this time, and heavy wind as we head through the overnight hours. Okay, let me put it back on the loop of the radar, because you can see the eye there. I'll take a quick look at YouTube and a couple of the other channels. Matt, if you see a question, shoot it to me real quick. And so I already see on YouTube, Richard Canova is asking, is going to be a Cat 4 by landfall? Not likely. There's no indication from any of the modeling data that we have, any of the intensity forecasts, that this will get to a Cat 4. So the Hurricane Center is actually doing their forecast, their intensity forecast, higher than what the official modeling is suggesting. So they've been skewing higher than what the models have been telling them, because I think they're trying to account for the fact that sometimes we've seen some, especially this year, we've seen several instances of rapid intensification. But because of those things that I outlined for you, the fact that we're going to be moving into cooler waters, we've only got about 6 hours before or less before it gets into that cooler zone of the temperatures in the lower 80s, upper 70s. And then we're already seeing that southwest wind component start to disrupt the core. So in all likelihood, we will not see this get to a Category 4, no. However, I do want to, with the little asterisk there that I'm at the end of my sentence, the Hurricane Center's margin of error about 24 hours out can be as wide as one category. So it could be stronger, than it is now. It could be weaker than it is now, and that's the official forecast at Category 2 at landfall. Nothing that I'm seeing on presentation tonight is indicating to me that this storm is trying to get it in a rapid intensification mode. It did get stronger today, but this afternoon and especially tonight. But nothing that I'm seeing on infrared imagery is showing me, with 20-something years looking at these things and forecasting hurricanes, that I'm seeing that would say that this is going to rapidly intensify. But I always put that asterisk there. You never say never. But what I'm seeing tonight, I think we're going to stay where we are. We're going to level off, and we're going to see Delta come in a little bit weaker. That's the hope. Of course, that it's going to come in a little bit weaker than it currently is. And where? Okay, I don't know. Oh, so Matt's trying to speak French Creole to me. Okay, I don't know. Somewhere in Louisiana. I don't know. Ask me one more time, Matt. I don't. Oh, Baton Rouge. Oh, yes, of course. Okay, so what's the question? Sorry. I think he said, were you trying to say Baton Rouge like in French? Okay. I know you guys can't hear him, but I heard him saying Baton Rouge. I'm like, what? So, but that's how some folks in Louisiana say. They say Baton Rouge. So, yes, I think Baton Rouge is going to definitely get some high winds for sure. I think, in the neighborhood of strong Category 1, 70 miles or so, give or take. Again, we're going to be able to get those nuances of the forecast once this gets a little closer. It's still a couple hundred miles south of the U.S. But we could see some bobbles here. And let me drag this up a little bit just so we get the lower edge there of the eye. So still about 260 miles or so from Cameron. So I do think that, most of Louisiana is going to have some variation of hurricane force winds. Of course, the highest winds are going to be at the coast where it comes in. It exponentially decreases as you head inland, and it exponentially decreases when you get further away from the center. If you're on the right-hand side of that, though, you're on the dirty side, we call it, or the most intense side. So there's definitely the possibility of you getting Cat 1 winds in gusts. I don't think you're going to have a sustained wind for hours. I think, if you get a feeder band that rotates over Baton Rouge, yeah, for sure, you're going to be getting 70, 80 miles an hour per hour winds. But really, we got to get a little better estimate on that tomorrow when it's a little closer to the U.S. And we account for some of these bobbles, the hurricanes aren't perfect machines. They're not on like trains that sit on rails and they never deviate off the track. These always deviate off the track by some. So even a small deviation of just 5 or 10 miles can significantly change who gets the storm surge, who gets the worst winds. So that's why I try not to pinpoint too much. But I think on the current thinking, on the current path, rather, we're definitely going to be talking about winds in the neighborhood of 70 to 80 in some of those other cities. Okay, let me look. Was there any? Did Sally strengthen? I'm trying to think. I believe Sally did. But I try not to. Laura is the one that came in over Cameron. So I know it's especially if you live there, if you have family that lives here, you compare it to a hurricane that you know. But we try not to compare it because it's like. Strawberries for that's the only thing I could think of. No two strawberries are alike, right? They may look the same and taste the same, but there's always going to be a little bit different in that one strawberry versus the other strawberry. So there's never going to be an identical scenario to Sally or Laura or Beta or any of the other hurricanes, the other 9 tropical storms that are tropical cyclones that hit the U.S. this year, that's going to compare exactly to Delta. I think with Delta, the bigger risk for this hurricane, as opposed to the Laura that came in as a Cat 4, or Sally, which was, I believe, a strong Cat 3. I don't remember, and I apologize. They tend to blend after a while. It's been such, we're on our 25th named storm this year, so it's very hard to keep up with all of them. But Laura was a powerful Cat 4 and continued to strengthen. It's a little different now because we've had upwelling from the hurricane season. There's been so many hurricanes and tropical cyclones that have impacted Louisiana and the northern Gulf Coast that cooler ocean temperature that's at the mid levels of the Gulf gets pulled up by these tropical cyclones as it moves over those waters. So we've had some upwelling, some of the cooler sea surface temperatures where it's colder down by the bottom of the Gulf have been pulled up. And that's why we've seen a little bit of these cooler numbers at the continental shelf there, and also the topography of the land underneath the Gulf. The continental shelf itself is very shallow, which generally would mean you would have warmer sea surface temperatures, but that's not the case off the coast of Louisiana. It's a little bit cooler, and we've had a couple of cyclones that have rotated over that region of the country this year, and that's why we've seen some of the slight drop in numbers. So I don't think it's going to intensify. As I mentioned, I think we're going to see maybe another 4 hours, 5 hours of its peak intensity. And then, fingers crossed that it's going to level off. And all the indications are that it should do that. It should level off, and we should see some slightly weakening as we head into tomorrow. Okay, was there any more that you... Okay, good question. So someone's asking, is it possible it could head towards Texas? Not likely. So another analogy that I try to say to folks is, people in Texas are saying, oh my gosh, it's getting closer to us, it's getting closer to us. It looks like that because these are massive storm systems. They're a couple hundred miles across. So you have to remember, a hurricane can't turn on a dime. It can't just go from this direction to this direction in a course of an hour. They're massive machines, if you will, and it takes hours and hours for it to turn from this to this. So the likelihood of it going, it's going west-northwest right now. I'm sorry, it's going north-northwest right now. And from it to go on this trajectory over to this trajectory towards Texas, it's not going to happen. The steering currents aren't there. You have to have something that steers these engines, just like anything else. A train has to be steered by energy or fuel, and there's nothing to steer it towards Texas. It's just the opposite of that. It's that trough that's over Texas that's going to actually turn it away from Texas. The larger threat is more of Louisiana is going to see this hurricane, and possibly a little bit of Mississippi, if we see some bobbles towards the right. So I don't anticipate it to head over Texas. There's no indication that will happen, because that trough of low pressure is like a big bulldozer that's going to help steer it more towards the north as we head through the next 24 hours. I hope that answered that. Okay, anything else, Matt? Because I can't read the chat on this one. Oh, wait, I got Facebook here real quick. Anybody else? Anybody else? Let me look. Okay. Someone said, unless you're Hurricane Charlie. Gosh, I lived in Charlie. I was here in Orlando during Hurricane Charlie. That is a whole other story. What a crazy year that was, 2004. But we'll save that for another time. Okay, you guys, I think that's going to do it. It is 12:06 Eastern Time. It's 11:06 Central Time. Just so you know how we're going to do things tomorrow. Meteorologist Mike Linden will be back in early tomorrow morning. I think around 6 a.m. he gets in. He will be here doing the live updates for you tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. We'll be doing them every 3 hours unless we need to do them more often than that. So 8 a.m., 11 a.m., and then 2 p.m., either I'm going to join you, or meteorologist Stephanie Lauber will be joining Mike, and we'll do some tag teaming, whether one of us will be doing the radar exclusively and the other Met will be doing the machine, the WSI machine, showing you graphics, showing you rain rates, rain totals, paths, all that kind of thing, the sort of thing. So all three of us will be here tomorrow all day long into tomorrow night. And then depending on what Delta does on Saturday, we may continue our extended coverage, or we may go back to normal live coverage, and Stephanie will be in to cover all of that Saturday and into Sunday. Of course, when we get into the weekend, it's going to be a bigger rain event and flooding event than this immediate threat, which is the storm surge and the wind. Okay, I think I've covered all the bases. Make sure you subscribe to our channels, you guys. If you haven't already done so, you can see the handles at the bottom of our screen. I'm assuming Matt's showing those to you right now. For now, though, I think that'll do it. We'll be back with another update in a few hours with the fast forecast, and Mike will be in here in a few hours as well to carry you through tomorrow morning, or later this morning, I should say. All right, you guys, have yourselves a great night. Get some sleep, and we appreciate you stopping in, and stay safe.